I was just trying to get my wife to chemo when the blue lights rolled across my windshield like a cold wave. She was already breathing short, that ragged little cough that says the medicine is wearing off, and I said clear as a bell that I was reaching for her inhaler. Then the officer yelled, "Gun!" and the morning cracked like thunder and glass, and everything went sideways at once. Pain came hot and electric up under my collarbone, and I tasted metal. I heard Lena scream my name from the passenger seat, and for a second the whole street went as quiet as a church before the radio started barking, and the story began to write itself without me. I kept thinking, hey, we were 10 minutes from the cancer center. This was supposed to be a quick in-and-out coffee after maybe swing by the farmer's market for peaches if she felt up to it, you know what I mean? A small good day, and then this. He came up with the walk of a man who expects the sidewalk to move for him. Uniform, sharp jaw tight, that twitchy hand resting on his holster like it owned the neighborhood. License and registration. No. Good morning. No. Here's why I pulled you over. Eyes cutting past my face to the bright scarf on my wife's head. And I did what I was trained to do. Hands at 10 and 2, voice low and steady. Every movement announced like I was narrating a cooking show. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Sergeant Mackey's voice still living somewhere in my skull from the core. Lena was already coughing, the kind that steals little pieces of the day, and I said, "Officer, her inhaler is in the glove box. I am going to reach for it now." Then everything sped up and slowed down together. His shout, the muzzle flash, my ribs catching fire, and the steering wheel jumping toward my chest as if to hold me upright. He started repeating into his radio like a man rehearsing a part. Suspect reached for a weapon, and I thought that's a neat trick, turning a purple inhaler into a weapon with words. Meanwhile, I tried to anchor myself by counting the tiny holes in the headliner. 1, 2, 3, don't float, breathe shallow, stay here. The paramedics came hard and focused. A woman with quick eyes named Nina told me not to float, like floating was a choice you make in a checkout line. Her partner slid an oxygen mask over my face, and suddenly the world had edges again. Nina pressed gauze to the wound and asked my name while the officer who shot me paced the curb like he was mad at the asphalt, still narrating, "Officer needs assistance." Suspect lunged, and behind him, a nurse from the cancer center jogged toward us with her badge bouncing and tears on her face. I know her. That's Lena. She's on my floor every other Thursday. He always waits for her. And the officer told her to stand back as if proximity to truth might be contagious. At Memorial East, they wheeled me through a door that swallowed sound. Dr. Morales met us there with steady eyes and hands that have memorized emergency. He took one look and said, "You're not dying today," like he was telling a stubborn storm to move along. They cut my shirt, and I watched my dog tags fall into a plastic tray. I watched a tech flip open my wallet and pause on the laminated card. I keep tucked behind my ID, the one that says, "What the ribbons on a dress uniform say," without the ceremony. 2 tours shrapnel, once a Bronze Star. I don't bring up at cookouts, and the doctor clocked it with a small nod that passed between us like a handshake. By the time I was stitched enough to talk, the department's first press release had already hit TV. A suspect reached for what appeared to be a weapon, and the officer followed protocol in a split-second decision. You could almost hear the commas marching neat and cold, and folks trying to make dinner would nod, because the sentences sounded official, but the neighborhood wasn't nodding. A 16-year-old named Talia filmed the aftermath from the bus stop. You can see the purple inhaler on the floorboard, and Lena's hands shaking, and me slumped forward trying to breathe with one lung. Her video hit 100,000 views before my pain meds wore off. Then 2 officers in polite voices and heavy boots knocked on her door to clarify a few things. She filmed them too, because that's how her generation handles daylight. "Maybe take the video down so you don't interfere," they said. And she looked right into her own camera and said, "Nah, truth, don't get deleted in this house." Yeah, that happened. Detective Renee Park caught the scene like a fisherman catches a current, not with force but with attention. She walked the angles, checked sunlight against the inside of my windshield, measured the blood spatter like it was a map drawn in a language most folks never learn. "It was bright," she said to Officer Malloy. That was his name, who had already written his memory on the radio, and the glove box is open with medical equipment visible. She asked why his body cam was dark, and he shrugged it off like a loose button. "Technical issue," he said, the kind that always seems to show up right before bad judgment. Park didn't argue. She let the pen do the work. It's amazing how big a tool a small notebook can be when a person knows how to aim it. Back at the hospital, 2 department men wanted my records to help assess threat and doctor. Morales told them to bring a judge's signature and a blank smile. Then he walked down to imaging and quietly made secure copies of everything that mattered, photos of the inhaler and the appointment card and the angle of entry on the wound, and locked it into the hospital legal archive where things go when you can't afford for them to be misplaced. He also called the VA liaison because that card in my wallet is more than paper, it's a bell only certain halls can hear. Here's something they don't put on recruitment posters. Marines have a way of finding each other when the wind goes bad. My old CO, Colonel Rourke, works in a windowless hallway in D.C. now, and he got a ping about a veteran shot during a medical run, and my name was on the second line. He carried it to General Aurora Pike, who has the kind of presence that makes quiet rooms stand up straighter. She watched Talia's video and read the first notes, and she said 4 words that bent the road. This is federal now, just like that. The case grew legs and a badge no local office could wave off. The morning after, black SUVs with small antennas and big authority pulled up at Memorial East, and at the precinct too, agents in windbreakers who speak like librarians and act like locksmiths carried out computers and phones in a folder actually labeled media guidance, which is hilarious in a dark way because if you have to package truth, you're not selling truth. Meanwhile, Agent Sofia Delgado sat with Detective Park, and the two of them compared notes like people building a bridge plank by plank over water that's been swallowing cars for years. While back at the hospital, a military family services captain slid a folder across to Lena and moved her chemo into the base system so we wouldn't be fighting insurance while we fought everything else. I wish I could tell you I spent those nights being noble, but mainly I counted the clicks before the ICU vents came on and asked nurses what day it was and watched the red second hand crawl around the wall clock like it was carrying a backpack. Pain shrinks a world, then God bless that same world for making nurses, because Nina would slip in and adjust the blanket and say, "Don't float, big guy." Like floating was a chore you could skip, and Dr. Morales would stop by even when he wasn't on shift and ask about Lena first. Not because he forgot who his patient was, but because he remembered who the whole story was really about. My wife would curl up in that vinyl chair and say, "You're still my 2 good feet," and I'd answer, "Shot high, baby, both feet are buy one, get one free," and we'd laugh careful because laughing hurt, you know what I mean, but laughter makes the walls back up a little. The twist. The one that reset the board didn't come with fireworks. It came with boots, measured and quiet. An honor guard moved down a hospital corridor that never expected that kind of dignity. General Pike walked into my room with Colonel Rourke and a small constellation of people who look like they sleep 4 hours and spend the other 20 carrying water uphill. I tried to sit up straight because some switches live in your bones and flip themselves. "At ease," she said with a smirk, like she could hear the Marine running in my head. She set a velvet box on the blanket and said, "For actions previously classified, and for the discipline that saved lives. Then and now." I looked at Lena, and my throat did that thing that makes a man cough to hide it. Then I said the only thing that mattered in that moment, ma'am. Her chemo is Thursday, and the captain behind her nodded already on it. On TV, the chief had just finished saying tragic and split-second and internal review, seasoning his sentences like parsley on a dry steak, and outside the microphones, Agent Delgado was filing charges that used long words for very simple ideas: deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to obstruct justice. While Park's scene work and Morales' medical record and Talia's camera and a nurse from the cancer center formed a chain that could hold weight. The feds pulled Malloy's training file, and it read like a weather report for a storm that everyone pretended might blow past. Failed de-escalation refreshers, anger flags noted, but never followed counseling recommended, and then lost behind a closed door. And then came the messages, the group chat that had memes you wouldn't show your grandmother, the kind that turned bias into a game. The body cam logs proving his technical issue was a habit with a schedule, and suddenly the department's favorite words didn't fit, because facts don't care if your sentences sound official. If you think any of this felt triumphant in the moment, it didn't. Accountability moves like a slow freight train, loud and deliberate. The arrests happened without fireworks. Malloy stepped into the hallway in gym shorts and found federal cuffs. The chief took a walk past his own nameplate with a woman half his size reading him his rights. In a voice you could measure flour with 2 sergeants. Learned that building a narrative is not the same as building a case. And the city did that long-held breath you hear in an audience when the magician shows his empty hands and then pulls out the rabbit anyway. 6 months later, a text hit my phone in the garden. 25 for Malloy, 15 for the chief. The settlement signed training mandates built into it. Federal monitoring set like a smoke detector that runs on hardwire, not batteries. I read it twice. then said it out loud to make it real. Lena wiped dirt on her jeans and rang an imaginary bell for the tomatoes and for herself and for the everyday miracle of breath that doesn't hurt. What changed in me wasn't a personality transplant, it was more like someone turned the dimmer up. I stopped making myself smaller so other people could keep their version of order. I started talking where I used to let my work speak. I stand in police academies now and tell classrooms what it feels like when an officer walks up with his mind already made and what it feels like when a different officer walks up with his mind open. I show them a purple inhaler and a glove box and a photo of my scar, and I tell them that fear doesn't become courage just because it wears a holster. That veteran injuries can make a movement look strange if you don't know what you're seeing. That compassion gets you home without the paperwork that ruins a good cop's night. I talk to rookies because stories change people faster than policies. Then we still use policy to catch everybody stories don't reach. The Walker Center, they named it after us even though I tried to wave that off, trains ER staff and first responders to spot service-connected injuries and trauma behaviors. Not to excuse bad acts, but to read the body, right, so you don't write the wrong report. The Marines pulled me into a role bridging veteran life and civilian law enforcement. I spend a lot of time in fluorescent rooms with stale coffee and a projector that only works if someone holds the HDMI just so, and when I'm done, there's usually a kid who hangs back and says, "My dad served," or my big brother twitches his shoulder when he's stressed, and I nod because you can make a lot of change with little nods. Not everybody clapped. Some people typed paragraphs about how I must have done something or how cops have a hard job. Both can be true, and also if we can't tell the difference between a purple inhaler and a gun, then the training is broken or the person is pick one. And a few called it theater, when the honor guard came as if ceremony cheapens truth instead of showing the shape of it, and that's fine. The country is big enough to hold your skepticism next to my scar. But I'll say this, I have a laminated card that means the Pentagon will pick up the phone, and that card shouldn't be the difference between justice and a shrug. If you swap me for a man without medals, the rules should be the same. Otherwise, we're not talking about law, we're talking about luck. And if you're wondering whether this was justice or damage control in better uniforms, I ask myself that too sometimes at 3 a.m. When the house is quiet, I land here. Justice is when the next traffic stop ends differently because someone changed before they had to. Justice is when body cams stay on because careers are tethered to truth. Justice is when a rookie hears my story and decides that being right-sized is better than being right. Now damage control is when we wait for another headline, another press conference, another tragic split second like it's a weather season we can't do much about. So yeah, I think we moved the needle, but the meter is still on the wall and it still needs watching. If you're still with me, I want to end where it began. Blue lights in the mirror, breath getting tight, the hard discipline of slow hands when everything in you wants to hurry. I reached for a purple inhaler and caught a bullet. The system reached for a cover story and found out daylight is stubborn. My wife reached for my hand and never let go. A teenager reached for her phone and told the truth. A doctor reached for a copier and preserved what mattered. A detective reached for the details and turned them into a bridge. The Marines reached for one of their own and walked down a corridor. Like dignity had a sound, and somewhere in there I reached for the part of me that doesn't make itself small, that stands up, not for applause, but because standing is the only way to breathe right. So tell me, where do you land on this? Justice served, or a lucky outlier symptom or disease? Can training fix what hate breaks, or do we need something stronger in the center? If this story made you mad, good. If it made you hopeful, better. Drop your city and what you've seen, argue with me. If you need to share this, if you believe daylight should be loud, and if something like this happened on your block, tell us. Because stories don't change the world by being true, they change it by being shared.